morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the only unapologetically progressive Sunday morning talk show for the Hoosier State. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I'm broadcasting from Bloomington. We have a great show lined up this morning. Got some newbies here joining the rotation, a couple new guests. Can't wait to introduce you to them. First, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. Make sure you are all subscribed over at whosleft.us. That is where you will find everything we publish. We got the podcast there. We have our backlog of these episodes, articles, all the good stuff. Again, that is whosleft.us. And hey, we have a special running over there right now. Normally $50 a year or $5 a month to become a paid member and help this project move along. But right now, I only need about $3.50, 30% off until the end of the year for a paid subscription. That's $3.50 a month or $35 a year. And hey, I get it. We got the holidays, look at my festive background, behold. And budgets are tight. I get it. So if you can't help out right now, do please subscribe on social media. The handle is at whosleft.us on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads. It is just at Who's Left on the others. All right. I think that covers it. Let us welcome in our guests this week, starting with our returning guest. There's our good friend, Derrick Holder. Derrick, welcome.
Hello. How are you?
Very good. Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you. Happy Hanukkah.
The last day of Hanukkah today. Is that correct?
Correct.
Wow, very good. Well, I hope it has been a good one for you and your family. Let us welcome in some new folks with us today. There is actual good friend Maria Douglas, who I know from way back in the day. Her husband and I worked together, but Maria is a first-timer here on the show. Maria, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Say, introduce yourself to the good folks who don't already know you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So Maria Douglas, she, her pronouns. I'm here in Bloomington, Indiana as well. And the last time Scott Aaron Rogers and I probably saw each other was maybe in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico because a generous gift from the shared employer that he mentioned. And so I've been in Indiana for 45 years. I came to school and I've been in Bloomington for over 30 years. No one needs to do math on that. It's beautiful to see, Scott and myself in terms of our evolution, right? And how we choose to move about in the world. So I'm also co-chair of Hoosier Asian American Power. We are a statewide organization that has 3 pillars: healthy democracy, reproductive justice, and racial equity. So we work hard on voting rights, voter protection. And right now, in terms of racial equity, we're really focused on immigration.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that a little bit this week. So let us meet our final guest here. And there's a doctor in the house. That's Dr. Rob Stone.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Happy and a bright solstice to you.
Is it that day? It is.
Yeah.
Shortest day of the year. But the show, same length. Doc, introduce yourself to the good folks.
Well, I was born and raised in Evansville, and then I left Indiana for college and medical school and did most of my medical training in Denver. I graduated from medical school in 1977, so it's been quite a long time ago now. And I moved back to my home state of Indiana, to Bloomington, then in 1983. So I've been here quite a while. I never went to school here in Bloomington, but I'm quite happily settled here. And so I started practicing initially as a family practitioner in the barrio in the Hispanic West side of Denver. And then when I moved back home to Indiana, I worked as an emergency room doctor for almost 30 years, mostly in Bloomington, but also in Martinsville, Connersville, Seymour, Bedford, Jasper, a bunch of different places around the state. And then since 2012, I've changed my career path a little bit differently. And now I do hospice and palliative care. So you could think of it as end-of-life care, although that's a bit of an oversimplification for what I do. And I still work a couple days a week. So I'm not retired, even though I'm about to turn 74. And for also my whole life, I've been an organizer and an activist, originally anti-war and then anti-nuclear power, against nuclear weapons proliferation. I met my wife in Colorado protesting at the Rocky Flats nuclear bomb facility. And my big focus since 2005 has been Medicare for all, meaning we need to figure out how to take care of everybody in this country. Our healthcare system's dangerously broken, and you all know all the problems, and maybe even there more, more than I do, you who are living in this system. But we want to figure out how to take care of everybody. So healthcare is a big issue.
It is, and really, I think we're going to see with the stories we covered this week that health touches all these issues. Really, so much of everything we talk about has to do with the public health and certainly our own mental health in this timeline. And I guess that's kind of where I want to start this week, man, because last weekend, there we are. Last weekend was not good. It was just a brutal, hellish weekend with a ton of bad news. So, three big stories really to begin this week. Starting in Australia, where officials say the Bondi Beach Hanukkah attack was carried out by a father and son pair. 15 people were killed, including a 10-year-old, and dozens were injured. Police and the Prime Minister of Australia down there, Anthony Albanese, called it an act of anti-Semitic terrorism. There were two gunmen. The older was 50 years old, a licensed firearm holder, and was killed by police. The younger is hospitalized in critical condition. Now, a bystander named Ahmed Al-Ahmed is credited with wrestling a gun away from one of these attackers and was wounded. Officials described him as a hero who likely saved lives. But funny story, the narrative, funny is a bad word. The narrative down there, obviously, is this is, those scary Muslims attacking Jewish Australians. Well, here you have a Muslim man stepping up and wrestling a gun away from an attacker with his bare hands. It saved a lot of lives. And it is ironic that, in the days after the attack, when we didn't really know all the details what was going on, the far-right disinformation machine ramped up into gear and invented a white guy named Edward Crabtree out of whole cloth and said, this was the hero. Weird reaction to things from the far right. Now, Derrick, I want to ask you, and tell me if I'm entirely wrong here, but I think about this attack in the context of a couple of years of increased anti-Semitism. And I do not want to minimize this in any way. This is a horrible act of anti-Semitic terrorism. But I think of a couple of instances, and I want to say it was former President Joe Biden here that said, without Israel, no Jew is safe. And I think of what the far-right Israeli government has been up to over those last couple of years and the way they like to conflate all Jews with the state of Israel, where Jewish people have been fighting the dual loyalty trope for decades. So, and again, the responsibility for this attack ultimately lies with the people who carried it out. But does the Netanyahu government bear some blame here for turning up the temperature?
It's a yes and a no. Of course, everything that Bibi does, well, look really bad on Jews worldwide. But I believe most people, or I would like to believe most people, can distance somebody being Jewish from the state of Israel. I mean, I'm Jewish, but I'm not Israel. It's like I love the country of Israel, but don't love the government of Israel. I mean, there is a difference.
Yeah.
It's like I love the United States wholeheartedly, but the government of the United States can take a leap off a bridge. So it's like there is a difference between, a country and a government.
Yes.
And at least half of the world understands that.
It's one of these nuanced things, and people, I just think, generally people worldwide have a hard time with nuance and the way we refer to people in large groups, and really it comes down to, yes, we're all individuals and we should be treated as such. I want to turn to one of the other horrific stories from last weekend. So in Rhode Island at Brown University, authorities say Claudio Manuel Neves Valente, a former physics graduate student, was the man who killed 2 students at Brown last weekend, and later shot and killed an MIT professor before being found dead of an apparent, self-inflicted gunshot wound at a storage unit in New Hampshire. Investigators recovered 2 9mm pistols there with him, and forensic evidence say that those weapons are linked to both attacks. A Reddit tip about a suspicious rental car helped crack the case, but officials say the motive remains unclear, with no known connection to the Brown victims and an academic link to the MIT professor. Those 2 men attended school together at the same time in Portugal. Now, Keystone Cash Patel's FBI is being criticized once again for rushing out to social media to say they caught their guy. Well, it turns out the person of interest they detained was not the guy. Again, just like we talked about in Australia with the far-right disinformation machine jumping into action, this week we also saw the desire to be painted as a victim. The far-right claimed that this was a targeted attack at Brown because one of the victims, unfortunately, was the vice chair of the college Republicans there at Brown. So, Doc, I'm gonna ask you about shootings and guns and our gun problem in this country through a public health lens.
So that's a really easy one. Yeah, we can dispense with that pretty quickly. Not. So the national group that I'm a part of, Physicians for a National Health Program, or PNHP, that's the group I've been a member of since 2005, and I'm pretty active with that group locally and nationally. Several years ago, our group made one of its position statements that gun violence is a public health emergency in the United States, and particularly because of the number of children who are killed by gun violence. And admittedly, that making a statement like that doesn't necessarily accomplish a whole lot on its own. And like so many things, gun violence has become so politicized, and the right has managed to, I think, paint this issue for so many people as, I'm not going to be able to go deer hunting if a Democrat gets into power and they take away my Second Amendment rights. And then, we could kind of go on and on about what the Second Amendment really must have been intended to say at the time it was written. But gun violence is just a horrible thing. And I worked some years in the ER, and I took care of some gun violence, and not just, people shooting at each other, but the availability of guns then in the houses as a tool of suicide for people who have an impulse to kill themselves. And I took care of a 16-year-old girl once who'd blown herself into pieces, and taken care of a number of people who shot themselves in the head. It's pretty gory stuff, and it leaves a pretty indelible trauma mark in my brain. So I don't know the best answer, and I certainly don't understand the politics of it, but it's a big problem.
It's another one of those things. Like it's nuance. It's that all or nothing thinking. It's, oh, they're coming for all of our guns, not, well, hey, we'd like to make it harder for people to get their hands on certain guns, or make it harder for certain people to access guns. And just same thing with what we were talking about with the shooting in Australia with Israel. It's that all or nothing thinking. It's like, oh, all the Jews are this way or whatnot, and we see that in the response to last weekend's other tragic news, where Rob Reiner, the acclaimed Hollywood director, actor, activist, he and his wife were killed in a violent attack, apparently by their own son, who has since been arrested. The shocking murders prompted remembrances of Reiner's long career in Hollywood and widespread condolences across the political spectrum, but not from the President of the United States, who responded by blaming the killings on Trump derangement syndrome and attacking Reiner personally, triggering bipartisan condemnation, including from prominent Republicans. Critics pointed out the remarks came soon after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, making Trump's response appear hypocritical and politically damaging as he refused to walk it back. Maria, you and I are about the same age. We grew up watching Rob Reiner movies. Tragic to see him, killed in such a grisly way by his own son, allegedly. Let us remember Mr. Reiner fondly. What is your favorite role of his, or your favorite Rob Reiner movie?
You would ask me that question because I don't watch movies very often. So so I don't watch movies very often. Give me like what your top 5 Rob Reiner movies are, and maybe I've seen them.
Well, listen, everybody goes to The Princess Bride, which is a classic. I mean,
yes,
certainly it is, dare I say, inconceivable if you had not seen that one.
I have seen that. My name is Inigo Montoya. You kill my father, prepare to die. Yeah.
Yes, very good. I find myself using Inigo Montoya lines, not just that one, but that word you say, what you think, it doesn't mean, I don't think it means what you think it means. I cannot tell you how often I use that meme. Just so much joy he brought through all of his movies.
And actually, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, that he was so pervasive. Like, I couldn't necessarily pick out like, oh, it's this one or it's that one, but when you hear Rob Reiner died, and at the hands of, his potentially, allegedly at the hands of his own son. I mean, this, like you said at the top of the show, just kind of underscores, all these tragedies having to do with guns. And so it seems to me that there are only certain things that we can control, right? We can't control people. We can't control, we try to, address public health and try to address mental health. And I am a huge proponent of that, being a social worker. But we do know it's the guns, right? And I believe, we do have the right to bear arms, but not military style situations, and definitely stricter gun laws. And those are things that we can control. As I said, we can't control people's mental health. Now, can we, it's a both and, in terms of stricter gun laws, and then in terms of also creating the conditions that lessen trauma, that address trauma, and really focusing on those types of things.
It's our society that is sick, and we need to address those root causes. And without that we're going to take whatever tools we have at our disposal to be destructive with. And, one of the symbols of a sick society, obviously, is the occupant of the White House. And, in this time, after that horrific weekend, when folks needed comfort, well, we got 20 minutes of an old man spewing verbal diarrhea at us. So Trump gave a short rally-style speech marking 1 year back in office. He was loud and unusually fast for him, and combative and incoherent as his poll numbers decline and prices increase. So there were no major policy announcements in this speech. I wonder if we even needed it at all, but he did announce a $1,776 warrior dividend bonus for active duty troops. Listen, sure, they're going to enjoy having that at this time of year, but this is not exactly, a major policy proposal that needed a primetime address. A lot of familiar claims, little credibility, exaggerated investment numbers, impossible math. Apparently, he's lowered prescription drug prices 600%, which means they're paying us to take drugs now, apparently. And also, false claims about inheriting historic inflation, typical culture war stuff, blame shifting. Trump touted his immigration crackdowns and attacked woke radicals and blamed Democrats for inflation and healthcare costs. That many folks were expecting a announcement about Venezuela and whether there would be war declared or something along those lines. But again, Trump said nothing really substantive and avoided escalation that could split his own base, which we are seeing increasingly break with him. Maria, I'm going to come back to you. You said you didn't watch this. I can't blame you.
Yeah, I did not watch. We were, we can't control people, right? And so being extremely intentional about how you use your time, energy, what goes in your brain, what your eyes see, what you expose your household to, I think is very important in this time. And so I did not watch it because I want to spend my time and energy elsewhere. And so I just would like to encourage everybody to take that, control over yourself or, autonomy, agency, to choose where you spend your time and energy, and actually, maybe focus that energy on doing local or statewide action.
Yeah. Well, and Dr. Rob, I guess, listen, I'm as guilty as anybody of consuming all of the news and all of the information. Probably not good for one's mental health, is it?
We live in this world of pain and pleasure and reward and dopamine and other hormones in our brains and neurotransmitters and on and on. And I can get guilty on this too. Oh, I'm getting ready to go to bed, and well, shouldn't I just check the headlines of the New York Times to see if some new disaster, if Trump, what the latest thing Trump did? I mean, like the worst thing you could possibly do before going to bed is to look at what's going on in the world. There's a lot of anxiety in the world that is not some kind of made up fantasy, because it is really terrifying. That we're facing this government out of control, this president out of control, surrounded by really bad people, and some part of me always goes back to my youth as a young Republican, actually, before the Vietnam War, and feeling like, hey, you gotta look at both sides, but it's getting harder and harder to keep a bipartisan appreciation until last week with the Indiana Senate. That was such a lift for me. I'm getting so far away from the question you asked me, but yes, we're all anxious and scared, and a lot of it is not for some crazy paranoid reason, but for good reason.
Let's, Doc, it's understandable. Like 10 years of this have fried all of our brains.
Yeah.
Derrick,
But I would
you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead,
the antidote to that anxiety for me is very clear. It's activism. It's figuring out how to reach out, how to do something little, something big, but to be engaged rather than to ignore it. Now, I need to set limits on it. And like Maria, I chose not to watch it live, but I did watch it, the clips of it that came up on Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel and things like that. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah, yes. Derrick, now, what about this warrior bonus? You're a military veteran. I mean, certainly our active duty troops will appreciate their 1776 bonus. Apparently, hey, staff talked him away from giving out a 1488 bonus.
So here's the thing about that. Him coming up with completely 30 minutes before the speech, all because of tariffs. You know, the funding for this was voted on like 6 months ago.
Yep.
It came from BAH, Basic Allowance for Housing. So it has nothing to do with tariffs. It was already appropriated like 6 months ago. So you had nothing to do with it, Trump. Once again, try to make himself look better than what he actually is. And I mean, 30 minutes before the speech. So your speech writers just went, oh crap, put in some bull crap right here. That's what they meant. Yes, I did watch it. Because, being part of media, have to watch what Dumpy says. And yeah, I want that 20 minutes back of my life.
Yeah. It not great. Well, listen. Frankly, I'm glad he didn't announce war with Venezuela, because that's what I thought he was going to do. Let's peek in on that area of the world right now. So, this comes the day after they had announced a total and complete blockade of sanctioned oil tankers entering or leaving Venezuela, a move critics and lawmakers are openly calling an act of war. The U.S. has already seized one Venezuelan oil tanker last week, you recall, escalating tensions as Trump labels Maduro a foreign terrorist, labeling his regime a foreign terrorist organization, and claims justification for this because of drugs and terrorism and human trafficking, or whatever. They're throwing stuff at the wall. No evidence needed, right? Venezuela, Russia, and international law experts are sounding alarms, with Caracas calling the blockade state piracy, appealing to the UN Security Council, and warning of regional destabilization. Now, congressional backlash is forming here. Representative Joaquin Castro says the blockade is unconstitutional, and lawmakers will soon vote on a resolution to force an end to hostilities. This fits a broader pressure campaign with tightened sanctions, this military buildup off the coast, lethal U.S. vessel strikes on what they say are drug boats, and legal moves to liquidate Venezuelan assets, all amid accusations of regime change ambitions tied to oil. Right now, we said that Castro was talking about a vote on a resolution to end hostilities. That vote was taken, and Congress, of course, squandered their chance to block this thing before going on vacation. Most Republicans and even a couple Democrats voted to keep these war powers with the president. So not great there. Maria, are you keeping an eye on this Venezuela stuff, or nah?
I literally just sent you a comment that says I have nothing on this.
sorry.
And so, no, it's
no,
fine.
there it is.
It's fine. But also, I can comment on anything, right? And the answer is peripherally, right? I mean, Hoosier Asian American Power, I do want to say, is a nonpartisan group, but, are very state focused, right? So, but we also know the trickle down, and what affects, the whole country, so I keep an eye on these peripheral. And what I don't appreciate is, these big acts of violence that turn out to be based on conjecture and probably based on an agenda that we're either kind of aware of or not aware of, or will be aware of later. And just transparency is so important, trust is so important, and none of these acts, including violence, cultivate any of that.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Now, Dr. Rob, you mentioned that your political activism goes all the way back to Vietnam, right? And it seems to me like the Trump administration here is trying to manufacture their own sort of Gulf of Tonkin incident. Does that rhyme to what you remember from back then? Yeah.
And for people who are listening or watching who don't remember, there was this alleged attack by North Vietnamese boats on a U.S. Navy ship in the Gulf of Tonkin that was basically a created episode to justify the United States escalating, because the United States was already illegally attacking and interfering in the affairs of a country and on in Vietnam. But actually, the things that are that are ringing more familiar to me is the build up to the Iraq War and how we were painting the evil despot rather than Maduro. It was Saddam Hussein. But also even the use of the term weapons of mass destruction, which now are being labeled as drugs coming from Venezuela, although they're having some pushback on that because actually Venezuela, initially they said Venezuela was producing fentanyl, which is, there's no truth to that. And then they went to, Venezuela is sending cocaine to the United States, and there certainly is some cocaine traffic, but the last I saw, it sounds like it's almost all actually aimed for Europe. And so, but they're trying, they're looking for the same kind of language to vilify, demonify, both the Vietnamese, the Venezuelan threat and the bad guys in charge. And it's terrifying because one of the most terrifying things for me is that there seems to be no ability for the Republicans in Congress to put any brakes on this.
Yeah. And you mentioned the declaration of like these drugs as weapons of mass destruction, right? They're obviously trying to manufacture some sort of pretext to escalate here. And along those lines, look, they gave away the game. There's a big profile in Vanity Fair this week of Trump White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. And in this, she basically gives the game away. Now, so this presidency is operating as an openly lawless project. It's not a disciplined administration. Their impulse-driven decision-making, revenge politics, and contempt for legal limits are normalized at the highest level, confirmed on the record by Susie Wiles. The Venezuela policy, for example, we were just talking about this, is it exposes the core deception. These boat bombings, these, seizures of oil, this naval blockade now. It was never about drug interdiction. And Wiles admitted the real objective is forced regime change in this article on the record to Vanity Fair journalist Chris Whipple. She also described the inner circle as chaotic, radical, and mutually contemptuous, describing Vice President J.D. Vance as a conspiracy theorist, Elon Musk as a ketamine-using saboteur of government, Russell Vought, the Office of Management and Budget Director, as a religious zealot, and Attorney General Pam Bondi as incompetent, all while still enabling them. And then the day after, they come out and voice their full-throated support for Wiles. This authoritarian behavior in this regime is it's not accidental. It's facilitated. The mass pardons for January 6 rioters, the extrajudicial deportations, weaponized prosecutions, National Guard deployments in cities, and tariff whiplash are all treated as acceptable tools of power rather than constitutional violations. Wiles admits this in her conversations with Whipple. She talks about these things like, oh, well, I didn't agree with that, or I tried to push back on that, but she keeps going right along. The real scandal here is not like the leaking from Wiles or from other figures in the White House. It's the impunity. It is the level to which they admit out loud what they are doing. And she spoke freely because this White House believes exposure doesn't matter. And when confronted with tapes, this is all on tape. The Whipple has hours and hours of conversation with Wiles. And still, the response wasn't accountability. It was denial and spin and the circling of the wagons. Derrick, you're a political sicko like me. Did you pay attention to this Vanity Fair article?
I believe Trump flat out said years ago, I could go out to Times Square, shoot someone in the head, and no one would care. That's how the administration is being ran. It's like you said, they don't care if somebody speaks up. They're Teflon. At least they are. Yeah.
Well, so far it has proven to be that they can get away with these things. What do you? She, I talked about her comments about Vance and about Vought and Bondi and the rest. She said the president himself has the personality of an alcoholic. Which is weird because like Trump is notoriously a teetotaler. He doesn't drink, but he has that addictive personality, right? And he just gets going on his tear and doesn't know when to stop. Maria, did you know that Susie Wiles was Pat Summerall's daughter? I'm like just finding this out in the last few years. This is the guy who was a football commentator for the long time, sat next to John Madden for years and years and years. What do you make of her description of Trump as having an alcoholic personality?
Thank you for that question. Yes, it's interesting as we grow up, right? Who becomes who and who does what and who's, parents and it's interesting that you asked me this question. I'm very happy about it. So I'm curious actually, at what an alcoholic's personality actually is. I am in recovery. And so my personality is one of an alcoholic because I am. And so I'm curious, just like what that means and, what that brings to mind, in the readers of this article and even in this conversation. So, I mean, we can guess, right? We can guess, but I feel like that was a little disparaging to alcoholics, to be honest, Yeah. And so just very interesting. Like you said, the impunity, the level of just audacity, but also like let's quit waiting for them to keep telling us what they're actually doing. We know what they're doing. All signs point to, right? Now they're literally telling us. So like what's Congress, what are we waiting for?
Yeah, right. Doc, what about you? Do you have thoughts on any of these folks? Did you see the pictures?
Oh my God.
With the photographers for Vanity Fair we're really doing the Lord's work, kind of on the down low. I mean, just the comparison of Stephen Miller, one of Trump's chief advisors, like side by side with a picture of Joseph Goebbels from the 30s, like to a T. They had to have known what they were doing, right?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to back up for a second on the alcoholic personality, because I think it was, those comments were a disservice to alcoholics. And my professional understanding is that psychiatrists do not actually believe there is a so-called stereotypical alcoholic personality. But there are certainly things that some alcoholics who are narcissists will exhibit in a really large way. But so I'm not really sure there is such a thing as an alcoholic personality. My own, not professional, but personal experience is that I'm involved in and I will reveal this confidentiality to the world, but I'm involved in a group called Al-Anon, which are alcoholic member family groups, because I've been affected by members of my family and their drug addiction or alcohol. And so I've spent a lot of time, the last 15 years in particular, practicing some understanding about how addiction works. And so whether it's drug addiction, alcohol addiction, doom scrolling, or whatever. And so I think everybody needs to be considered as an individual and figure out how we can support them rather than calling. But I think she was trying to be hard on Trump, calling him an alcoholic personality. And I think you could just call him you could say all sorts of bad things about him, but I wouldn't. But I didn't really buy into the alcoholic personality. Now then, the pictures. Oh my gosh, it was it's such partly it's just the setting. This is Vanity Fair, which is famous for its graphics, for its pictures, for its beautiful views, trying to make people look their best. And so I would love to have been a part of some of the editorial committee discussions about how this was going to be laid out and how it was going to be played. And to me, the pictures of not Pambani's, which is her name now.
Oh, Caroline Levitt.
Caroline Levitt's little puncture wounds from her filler injections was particularly stunning. So I don't know what more to say other than it was. One is continually amazed at how much people who are have the sense that they're bulletproof and that they can get away with anything. Also allow these, themselves to be not only recorded but photographed, and then sometimes you can see the ugliness right alongside the beauty.
Yeah, the photographers really just highlighted what a superficial yet entirely ugly mess this entire administration is. And Maria and Rob, I want to thank you both for your vulnerability in that conversation. You're talking about things that you didn't have to talk about, and I appreciate that very deeply. I want to move on to our next story. So we've all been waiting for the Epstein files to be released. You recall Congress passed a law last month demanding the release of all relevant materials in the Epstein case. And, Trump's was backed into a corner and eventually relented and said, oh, yeah, I know, I totally support releasing all this information. So, well, what has happened in that meantime, we don't know, but we did get a huge batch released on Friday. Now, like I said, they were supposed to release all relevant materials, and we only got partial materials. And I'm summarizing the story from Axios here. So on Friday, the Justice Department released thousands of these Epstein-related documents, but acknowledged the release is incomplete, with additional files still missing and no firm timeline for full disclosure. They say they're going to release them in batches. I guess we got some more yesterday. The newly released DOJ files include surveillance video from his jail, flight logs, interviews with Ghislaine Maxwell, his partner, and disturbing victim statements alongside heavily redacted materials. And by heavily redacted materials, I mean there are pages completely blacked out. Now, the DOJ says key records remain withheld or redacted to protect ongoing investigations, survivor identities, and claimed national security concerns, but we can all speculate what they're really hiding. Lawmakers from both parties are pressing the DOJ for answers, warning the department missed their December 19th deadline under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Separately, Congress continues releasing state-sourced Epstein records, including emails, photos, schedules, and documents referencing Trump, former President Bill Clinton, Elon Musk, and others. We saw some Michael Jackson pictures in this last batch. Hadn't seen him in these things before, underscoring that major portions of the Epstein records still remain unreleased. So, we see they're withholding some documents, but then even worse, yesterday, stuff that they had released disappeared. DOJ quietly removed at least 16 Epstein-related files from its website within a day of the release, including photos and materials tied to Epstein's property, without explaining why. Some of the removed files reportedly included a photo featuring Donald Trump alongside Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Gee, I wonder why they removed that one. Lawyers raised redaction concerns after publication, with attorney Gloria Allred saying her team contacted the DOJ about names that should not have been publicly disclosed. The DOJ reportedly acknowledged some names would be redacted, suggesting the files were posted sloppily, then pulled. Again, the removals are sparking bipartisan backlash and cover-up accusations, with House Democrats questioning transparency and Republican Representative Thomas Massey accusing the DOJ of violating the Epstein Files Transparency Act by withholding materials and asserting privilege beyond what the law allows. Derrick, I mean, listen, this is what was gonna happen, right? I never thought we were going to get all the information. There's no way this Trump administration was going to implicate their dear leader.
I want to know what national security issues were in the Epstein files. Like, what the hell could be considered national security for a known convicted pedophile?
There's speculation that he may be involved with intelligence.
Oh, and Trump was an informant for the FBI. Okay, that makes absolutely no fucking sense.
Well, Trump may have been a target of intelligence operations by these other other nations, which Epstein may or may not have been working for. I mean, listen, a lot of folks don't know this. It does not come up enough, but Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, is notoriously like a triple agent. He was a British spy, he was a Soviet spy, he was an Israeli spy. And I don't doubt that it runs in the family, let's say.
No,
Maria. Sorry. Go ahead, Derrick.
No, you're good.
All right. Maria, I wanted to get your take on this. I mean, now they say that they're redacting these things to protect some of the victims, but then they went out and they posted some of the victims' names or pictures, and now they're hastily redacting them. Where do the women who were abused by Epstein and his clients, where are they centered in this?
Clearly nowhere, because if they were centered, we wouldn't spend all this time and resources and meeting time, whatever, money, trying to get these files. Because if we just believed women, and not that it should take more than one, like clearly I feel this in my body, like it shouldn't take more than one person to say that they were abused, that they were raped, that they were trafficked, that this happened. And again, it's like what I said, maybe about Venezuela or something, how many times are we going to have to be told, or we have to read it, we have to see it to believe people, to believe women, to believe citizens of the United States, that this happened to them?
I think we saw among the files that were released was a report made to the FBI by one of the victims in like 1996, and it basically was ignored.
I don't even have a word for that in this moment. People who say that racism is over, everybody has equal rights and things like that. This case in particular clearly shows the inequity between the genders. Because
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Geez. Doc, have you been following this Epstein saga at all?
I've not been following it terribly closely because I've just had to set a few boundaries here and there. But what I'm so struck by now is that, excuse me, the fact that they're continuing the cover up in such an obvious way just makes it obvious to anybody anywhere on the political spectrum that they've got something to hide. And so the part of me that's maybe not the part of me that I'm proudest of is that I love the idea of the president and his cronies are continuing to squirm. Because they're obviously really embarrassed and really uncomfortable with this, and they know that they're spending a huge amount of political capital just to try to put the fires out.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's fracturing the base. We've seen departures over this. Republicans defected. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Lauren Boebert, Nancy Mace, firebrand Republican women were early to break with the party on the Epstein stuff and sign the discharge petition that produced this Transparency Act. And eventually the rest of the party had to relent on it because of their break. Whatever it is that will eventually destroy this man, it can't come soon enough. The harm they are doing to all Americans will take decades to clean up. Along those lines, and I'm glad I've got you here for this today, Doc, because we've got a lot of medical stories this week. I don't know, it was serendipity if the world knew that you were going to be on our panel today and blessed us with this degree of let's say medical fuckery that we have to talk about, and we're gonna talk about RFK and the CDC. So I've got a bevy of stories here, and the first one, hey, making measles great again, right? So U.S. hotspots are seeing more measles cases as the national total nears 2,000. The U.S. is on the brink of losing measles elimination status with over 1,900 cases recorded this year. Just 1 month shy of the 2,000 case threshold, and that includes 46 new cases in the latest update. Measles, highly virulent. I'm sure you can tell us, Doc. It spreads rapidly. If it is in your area, you are going to get it unless you're vaccinated. So this is spreading almost entirely through outbreaks, 49 outbreaks in 44 jurisdictions, accounting for 88% of all cases. An additional 24 cases involve international visitors, underscoring how porous this thing has become. This is an overwhelmingly vaccine-preventable crisis. 93% of the cases are among unvaccinated people or those with unknown vaccination status. Only 4% of patients were fully vaccinated. Children are bearing the brunt, with 2/3 of cases under age 20, with significant spread in elementary schools tied to low vaccination rates. So far, 222 people have been hospitalized, with 3 confirmed deaths. Sticking on CDC news and vaccinations and what have you, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have ended recommendation for all U.S. newborns to receive the hepatitis B vaccine. The CDC ended its 30-year recommendation for universal hepatitis B vaccination at birth, now limiting it to infants whose mothers test positive or whose status is unknown. This shift follows pressure from Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his vaccine advisory panel, and reframes routine vaccination as individual-based decision-making, pushing parents to decide with their doctor instead of following clear public health standards. Public health experts are alarmed, warning the change will increase preventable childhood infections, create confusion, and reduce vaccine uptake by weakening insurance coverage and clinical guidelines. This ends a proven successful program. Hepatitis B infections dropped nearly 90% after universal infant vaccination was introduced. Critics say the CDC is abandoning science in favor of anti-vaccine ideology, signaling a broader retreat from evidence-based public health under Kennedy's influence. I've got a couple more medical stories, but I want to pause there and talk about these, because these, I think, form a pair. How do medical professionals navigate a world where the CDC itself is not giving proper guidance?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't pulled out all my hair yet, but this is crazy stuff. Personally, I took care of a little girl with measles encephalitis at Denver General Hospital in 1975. It turns out there are not that many doctors still practicing who have seen and taken care of measles cases. And in 1975, I saw this little girl, and her face was just kind of twisted up, and I can only imagine it must have been beautiful. And she was twitching, she had seizures, and our team in the pediatrics ward there diagnosed her with measles encephalitis, which would not be fatal, but would leave her with permanent brain damage. And then the measles vaccination had come out in 1969 or something like that. There was still measles in the United States in 1975, but the vaccine was incredibly successful at stopping measles, because measles is an incredibly infectious disease. If a measles patient walks through a room, the virus can stay in the air for 2 hours. 9 out of 10 people who come into contact with a person who's been infected, they'll get measles if they weren't vaccinated. So it's just incredibly infectious, and it's incredibly dangerous. And for many years before we made a huge progress against measles around the world, it was one of the leading causes of death in the developing world, because children who get measles who are at all malnourished are then at very high risk for the consequences of really serious illness and death. But even in Indiana, there were 8 cases in Indiana up around Fort Wayne that were reported in August, September, and I don't have recent data on what happened in that part of the state, but they were in religious communities that didn't vaccinate. And kids have been hospitalized. With this outbreak, several children have died, and now we're seeing these outbreaks. It was the worst of it was in Texas, and now we're seeing these outbreaks in South Carolina and just different states, and it's likely to just get worse. So measles by itself is just a hugely important issue for the United States and for the world and for parents and for children and for all of us. And so, again, rein me in if I get going too long, but so there was a study published in the kind of the premier British medical journal called The Lancet years and years ago, that they linked measles vaccination with autism. And then that study was completely debunked. It was withdrawn, retracted. It was proven to be completely wrong. And the methodology, it was just, made up bullshit. But that guy, Andrew Wakefield, who published that study, still manages to get his way into things and get onto podcasts. And he continues to support himself financially by pushing this forward. And then, as an interesting thing right now, lately, RFK has been talking about looking at the vaccination standards in Denmark. And Denmark's a really interesting country for vaccinations because they have been the source of a lot of what we know about vaccinations, because they've got a national health program. So everybody is enrolled and they can study everybody pretty well. And 20 years ago, they put out the definitive study where they looked every single child growing up in Denmark and when they got vaccinations, and if and when autism spectrum was diagnosed, and there was no correlation between measles vaccine and autism, and that was a long time ago. So that's measles, and I could go on and on. Hepatitis B, likewise. I've got personal connections to hepatitis B, but the most important thing to understand about hepatitis B is that it is much more common. It is endemic in Asia, China, Taiwan, Malaysia, and that part of the world. And so hepatitis B is very common there, and it is the number one cause of liver failure and liver cancer. And it's a huge cause of problems in the United States as well, but it's really the tragedy of hepatitis B, particularly in Southeast Asia, and then the triumph of getting people vaccinated. And it is so it has been so gratifying to see hepatitis B. Yeah, you mentioned it, down by 90%. The problem with hepatitis B is that it is not passed through the placenta from mother to child, but it can be passed as the child goes through the birth canal. The child can get infected with hepatitis B right there, right then. And so that's why we give hepatitis B to children in their first day or two of life. And it's been incredibly effective. Just that one shot right at birth seems to almost completely prevent the risk that child had hepatitis B transmitted to it. Now, in Denmark, they don't give hepatitis B to newborns. And the reason is because they test 99.9% of their mothers during their prenatal period to see if they have hepatitis B, and they only vaccinate the ones who are not carriers of hepatitis B. So that's a reasonable strategy if you've got a 99% test rate for hepatitis B during pregnancy. But I think everybody listening here has not missed the fact that Indiana, for instance, has some of the worst infant mortality data in the country, and something like 18%, well, I don't know about the Indiana data, nationally, about 18% of women do not get hepatitis B testing during pregnancy because we do such a terrible job of providing health care to pregnant women. And so in the United States, it makes absolute sense. I saw a statement from one of the public health leaders in Denmark yesterday he said, we don't understand why people in the United States wouldn't want to give hepatitis B at birth because their system, misses a lot of people. We don't have to do that, but it's not because we're worried about side effects of hepatitis B. It's just a matter of simple cost efficiency. If you've got a really well-functioning system that tests everybody, then we can focus where we spend our money and just vaccinate the people who need it. But the United States doesn't have that luxury. But they didn't stop doing it in Denmark because of risk of side effects, because there are none. It was just a different way to manage their population health.
Well, right, because they have that universal healthcare system, so they can catch these things up front. Because people, aren't like worried about co-pays and stupid crap just to get their routine prenatal care. They can catch those things up front. We have a lot of people fall through the cracks beforehand, and then or have to do things on the back end to catch it. I want to move on to another medical story, and I will let Derrick and Maria get in here shortly. But so also this week, we saw the Trump administration move to cut off transgender care for children, moving to effectively eliminate gender-affirming care for minors by proposing to cut off Medicaid, Medicare, and CHIP funding to hospitals that provide it. Again, RFK framed gender-affirming care as malpractice, directly contradicting every major U.S. medical association that supports evidence-based treatment for transgender youth. This threat isn't just symbolic, because nearly all U.S. hospitals rely on federal health funding. The rules would functionally ban care nationwide, even in states where it remains legal. They're using market pressure and threats of withholding funding to hospitals in those areas. The proposals aren't final yet, but they are already chilling care, with providers pulling back in anticipation of federal retaliation and lawsuits looming. This is part of a broader federal crackdown on transgender rights, including redefining sex in federal law, excluding gender dysphoria from disability protections, and criminalizing providers. Now, again, Doc, the medical associations, the AMA and the American Academy of Pediatricians, both say, yes, kids with gender dysphoria should receive gender-affirming care. But they, RFK and his ideological allies, don't seem to care about what the actual doctors say. They're driven by their extremism. Do I read that correctly? Yeah. It's still another horrible politicization of very complex personal health and emotional decision making, and the fact that trans people have been picked out now and brought into such a horrid situation of, I don't know, somehow people feel like they can make fun of trans people, they can hate trans people, they can discriminate against trans people, and they can, raise money against trans people, on and on and on. It's terrible, it's awful, it's horrible. And so the care for trans people is really tricky. It's tricky from a medical perspective. When do you treat with what? But for a family, for parents and children in particular, it's really complicated. And particularly a lot of the people who really come to their gender awareness as adolescents, it's a really tough time in life just to start with. And this just makes, and everything to do with sexuality is really tough. And this stuff makes it crazy. I mean, I just know numbers of people who say this issue alone is the most likely thing to cause them or their children to leave this country, because they just don't feel safe
here. And I know pretty well a couple of doctors who practice gender affirming care in Monroe County in Bloomington, and it's and I just honor their bravery and their courage to do this, because I'm sure it's not an easy thing for them. But my heart just goes out to the people involved, and at the same time, to be making these grand statements that it is wrong, it's malpractice to treat these people. Is that itself is malpractice to say something like that. I mean, that's just so irresponsible. And we're talking about less than one child in 1,000 has significant issues with gender dysphoria. So that is, on the one hand, not a tiny, insignificant in any way, a very significant percentage of people, but it's not like it's everywhere either. So these are people who are in unusual circumstances, who really need to be cared for in as holistic and loving and caring a way as possible. And they don't need this other noise and fear and craziness on the outside, just making things worse.
Yeah. Maria, I'm looking at this and the vaccine stuff and all of it, and I'm seeing the typical Republican anti-science rhetoric. They don't seem to care what doctors say, what public health officials say. These people think public health is communism and everything should be made at an individual level, and they either don't understand or refuse to understand that certain things have to be done collectively. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, you're reading that right. And it is stunning, how people just do not pay attention, to the data. The amount of self-harm, the amount of suicides that are, this brings me back to, what I said earlier in terms of what we can control, right? We can control not ostracizing people who are transgendered. We can choose to not, to not spend time and energy and money on fighting people being people. What this administration and what some people choose to spend their time and energy on is stunning. And I always ask myself, what is at the root? Because I like I said at the top of the show, I'm about the root causes of things. I don't like to spend time and energy on band-aids, right? On treating the symptoms. And now it takes all work, right? It takes everybody, all work at all levels. But I just feel like, our time and energy could be spent in such a more economical, ethical, just way. I asked myself, what's the fear? What are you afraid of? Because fear drives most people's behaviors who behave in that way. And then also who benefits, right, is something that I ask as a person of color as well. Who's benefiting from these conversations and from the, so it is just stunning. I'll just say it, that the money, time, and energy resources are wasted in this way.
Yeah. So, hey, listen, though. Somebody out there gets that RFK needs to go, and maybe from an unexpected place. So this was actually from News Nation, of all places. Mike Pence's conservative group is demanding Trump fire RFK Jr. Oh, is it because he's bad for public health? No, it's because he's failed to review the safety of mifepristone, despite promising to do so at his confirmation hearing. See, the complaint isn't that RFK is too extreme, it's that he isn't too extreme enough. Anti-abortion groups want stricter controls or rollback after the FDA approved a generic version of the drug. Pence's allies argue RFK ignored data and blocked oversight, framing the issue as regulatory failure rather than ideological disagreement, exposing a crack inside the Trump coalition. RFK Jr.'s anti-vax crunchy contrarianism doesn't line up cleanly with the religious rights abortion absolutism. Derrick, it's like Godzilla, right? Let them fight.
Yeah, you can let them fight, but I mean, Pence has shown his backbone a couple times. He's GOP. Yes, he is horribly religious. But, he still fights for what he believes is right for this country. And, sometimes that lines up with common sense sometimes.
Broken clocks right twice a day, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, I kind of give him props on saying that, RFK Jr. is a idiot, but like you said, I've given him props twice in my life. And that was January 6th and this. So
yeah. These splits in the coalition surprise. About that, so one more I point out here in the healthcare field, right? So House Republicans passed a symbolic healthcare bill that dodges the real crisis. Their package offers conservative tweaks, but does nothing to stop the ACA premium subsidies from expiring at the end of the year, which will spike costs for 22 million Americans. Leadership under Mike Johnson refused to allow a vote on extending the subsidies, triggering a rare revolt for moderate Republicans. And the word moderate is doing a lot of work there. Moderate is working so hard there, it must be an immigrant. So these 4 Republicans joined Democrats on a discharge petition to force a House vote on a 3-year extension. Now, Mike Johnson's running out the clock, delaying this vote into January, even though these subsidies expire at the end of December. A choice the Democrats and those moderates say guarantees immediate harm to constituents, right? There's at least 1 month of giant insurance spikes if nothing is done. So the earliest, if this thing passes in January, that they could lower prices, that they could put these subsidies back in place, would be for February. Again, these quote-unquote moderates openly blame their own leadership, saying that doing nothing is worse than a flawed extension, and accuse the speaker of late, unserious policymaking that leaves families exposed to higher premiums. The path forward is procedurally messy and politically volatile. A forced House vote could pressure the Senate into a bipartisan compromise, but GOP leadership is still trying to peel moderates away and avoid owning the fallout. Again, Dr. Rob, all of this is failing to deal with the problem the right way, and that is a national healthcare program.
Where to start? Yes, because we have this patchwork quilt, torn and tattered patchwork quilt of healthcare coverage things, and it's all relates internally and in all these complicated ways and causes huge inefficiency. And just as we see, so this little side thing, which I feel like I understand health policy pretty well, and health politics still bewilder me after years of trying to understand it. But how it was that during COVID, the Biden administration gave some extra juice to the Affordable Care Act, subsidies that are given to help people who get coverage through the Affordable Care Act afford their premiums. And because the government subsidizes part of their premiums, so they gave a little boost to that during COVID. And they did all sorts of things during COVID to expand public health in ways that probably saved millions of lives. But this particular little piece of it was something I didn't even pay any attention to at the time. And although my kids are mostly covered under Affordable Care Act marketplace plans. And so now my kids are facing these incredible increases in their premiums. And so now getting back into these interlocking pieces here. So 24 million people are going to see their health insurance premiums rise significantly, maybe at a minimum 15%, 15%, at a maximum 200%. And maybe that's not even the maximum. So what's going to happen is, of these millions, tens of millions of people, they're going to start getting these bills that are way more than they've been paying. And they're already squeezed because of the economy. They're already squeezed by inflation at the grocery store. But here we're talking about levels of inflation way higher than 4 or 8% increases in groceries. And so what are people going to do? The sickest people are, and they know who they are. They're going to figure out some way to keep their coverage. And the less sick people, of course, they only believe they're less sick. They don't really know whether they're going to fall on the ice tomorrow morning or have a heart attack next week or be diagnosed with uterine cancer in 3 weeks. But those people are going to say, oh my gosh, I've just got to take this crazy chance and either drop my coverage completely or jack around with getting the least expensive premium policy, which then is going to have the highest copays and deductibles and stuff. And so one of the ways then that's going to be like ripples going out is that people covered under these plans are going to end up being sicker. And that's going to end up meaning that the insurance companies are going for everybody, not just insurance companies covering people in through the marketplace, but the insurance companies covering everybody who's got employer-based insurance are raising their rates because they're expecting that the general pool of people getting covered is going to be sicker and therefore more expensive. And it just kind of goes on and on.
It's all a patchwork, right? And like you said, we have to address this thing at the root issue. We need a national health program if we're going to get through this thing. And the reason Republicans cannot come up with an alternative to the ACA is because it was kind of their idea. This is the Republican health plan. Obamacare originated with the Heritage Foundation, and we'll see. That's why we need to keep propping it up and doing things like this. I mean, listen, a lot of Democrats aren't going to like this. ACA kind of sucks. It was always a half measure. And if we don't do Medicare for all or something like it, we're going to keep running into problems like this. Boy, at least one thing maybe medically right this week. So Trump signed an executive order fast tracking the reclassification of marijuana. Trump signed this executive order directing marijuana be reclassified from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. So, it's not legalizing it. It's not descheduling it. It is making it available for testing, medical studies. It explicitly does not legalize it. And Trump went out of his way to reject recreational use, framing this move as common sense relief for people with chronic pain. It would lower regulatory barriers and expand potentially access for seniors, veterans, and patients, regardless of state level policies. The directive also targets CBD, instructing the White House to work with Congress to expand safe access while restricting products deemed risky. And we're gonna turn to Indiana because here our Attorney General is not happy with his president. And props to whoever is writing the headlines over at Wish 8. The headline was, Rokita is blunt in disagreement with Trump's marijuana order. Attorney General Todd Rokita is formally opposing the reclassification, joining other AGs from 8 other Republican-led states in arguing marijuana should remain a Schedule 1 drug on par with heroin and LSD. Rokita claims the science still supports Schedule 1 status, claiming alleged harms to children, adolescents, and public safety, particularly around impaired driving. Indiana officials are signaling resistance, not adaptation. Rokita's office says it will evaluate the order closely, framing the move as a public health threat rather than an opportunity for medical research or pain treatment for Hoosiers. Derrick, what do you think this means? Are we going to see national legalization? I mean, this executive order certainly isn't that, but is it a step in that direction?
It's a step in the right direction. And Rokita, dude is, to use an old term, such a square. He hasn't had a good day in his life. I personally don't partake in it because it is illegal. If it was legal for medical use, I would use it because I have massive PTSD. I have massive pain from MS. It would help me tremendously. But only reason I don't do it is it's illegal in this state. So until it's legal, I'm kind of stuck with, ibuprofen, which doesn't touch my pain. But hey, I deal with it because, Republicans want to say you don't get relief.
Republicans definitely don't want you to get relief or release, because Rokita also this week is threatening to sue online porn websites. So actually, he is suing them. He's suing Pornhub's parent company and other adult websites, claiming they violated Indiana's age verification law. Now, this state law requires sites with material, quote, harmful to minors to verify users are 18 plus, leading Pornhub to block access in Indiana rather than collect IDs. Rokita argues that geo-blocking is insufficient and that sites must also block VPNs and other tools that mask users' locations. The lawsuit claims adult sites violated both the age verification law and Indiana's Deceptive Consumer Sales Act by allowing potential workarounds. Now, privacy and civil liberties advocates warn the logic could extend far beyond porn, threatening VPN use, online anonymity, and digital privacy more broadly. That's my concern. If you can't use a VPN to hide your location, this is how they eventually wind up cracking down on dissidents. And folks in foreign countries with authoritarian governments rely on VPNs to get accurate outside information. We talked about the authoritarianism of this administration up at the top. That is a potential thing I worry about. But just looking at it from the public health and the pornography standpoint now, Maria, your kids, couple years, they're around my kids' age. How do you have that conversation with them? Because obviously this stuff is out there. And I'm out here arguing that we shouldn't have these age verification laws because they're a mess, and how do you implement them? But still, especially for young boys, they get the wrong idea looking at pornography online. How do you broach that subject with the kids?
And let me just say, young boys and young girls get the wrong.
Absolutely.
Right. So, again, root of the problem, conditions and that you're creating in your home, in your family, in your parenting. I don't trust the internet, but I trust my kids because I know what we've talked about. I know what I continue to talk about incessantly to their, but so for me, it's not necessarily talking specifically about porn. I will say I personally am not against sex work. Again, it's, having those conversations about being respectful, getting consent, talking about what, having those conversations between, potential partners and whatnot. It's not necessarily about porn, because, if you say, don't look at porn, they're like, what's porn? And they're going to go look at it. And so, I mean, but also it's out there, and you can't not, again, that's something that access to it you can't control. And I will say, in that article, it was interesting to me the way the article was written, that the attorney Rokita's office said that they had internal investigators were able to log
Yes,
in.
yes.
And I was
I saw this.
Are you trying to head off some leak or whatever, that porn was being accessed from that office? I said what I said.
Well, yeah. Hey, we actually have a rash of that going around Indiana lately. There was this investigation into the lieutenant governor's office, Micah Beckwith, that they were watching, AI deepfake revenge porn in their office. Let's talk about Beckwith, by the way, and move on to him, because he's in the news this week again. Can't seem to avoid it. He is a shameless attention whore, but he's getting it for probably not the reasons he would like this week. So Tom LoBianco had this at 24 Site News. He's been all over this story. You should go subscribe to him over there on Substack. So Life Church, this is where Beckwith preaches. That's his other gig. Is losing congregants amid fallout from reports involving lead pastor Nathan Peterno, including allegations of inappropriate sexual conversations with minors and the arrest of his son on child sexual abuse material charges. Former congregants estimate at least 100 families have left the church's largest campus, which is led by Beckwith, who is also a church employee and a close ally of Peterno. So church leadership have allegedly pressured departing families to return and offered conflicting explanations about how explicit videos involving Peterno and his wife were found on his son's phone. Beckwith has publicly defended his friend and co-host of podcast Jesus, Sex, and Politics, urging congregants not to ask questions and framed the controversy as attacks by demonic enemies. That's us, apparently. While declining to address the underlying allegations. All of this, while at the same time, Beckwith is butting up against his boss, Mike Braun. They're publicly contradicting each other over whether the Trump administration threatened to withhold federal funding after Indiana lawmakers rejected Trump's congressional maps. Braun called Beckwith's claims fake news, saying there was no explicit threat or quid pro quo, even as he previously warned lawmakers that rejecting the maps could strain Indiana's relationship with the administration. Beckwith, however, has doubled down, citing conversations and a now deleted Heritage Action post claiming federal funds could be stripped if Indiana failed to pass the maps. Democratic Party Chair Karen Talion called the conflicting accounts irreconcilable, raising questions about whether threats were made and who is telling the truth. Now, GOP legislative leaders like Senate President Pro Tem Rod Bray downplayed any fallout, saying Indiana's relationship with the federal government is expected to remain stable. Maria, I want to come back to you here. Any relationship involving Micah Beckwith seems like stable would not be an apt descriptor.
I mean, back to the Vanity Fair article, right? Totally unstable, and at odds, and can't get their messaging, correct. And again, how many times do we need to be told, that, in terms of, what their aims are, what their violence that they're perpetuating every day. And again, in terms of Life Church, that's stunning, that the audacity. Don't ask questions. Like, don't ask questions. And I keep whatever. I was raised, here. So if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Like, how many times do we have to be told? And what were the conditions in that in the home? That these children were being perpetrated upon. Like, what were those conditions? But don't ask questions. Don't ask questions.
Don't ask what that's demons, Maria. Yeah. That's the evil liberals like us that are planting these seeds of doubt in their congregation, and gotta ignore what your eyes tell you. I want to.
I will say,
pick up
I
the
do
pace
also
a little.
want to. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to point out that pedophilia is comes from the tolerance of pedophilia comes from above the top of the ladder in terms of this administration. So we're just seeing the tolerance of this, and unfortunately Indiana's had so many cases lately coming out, and actually I'm glad that they're coming out, because that means people are reporting, right? But if there's that many coming out, then how many have not been reported? And it's just like,
yeah, and
don't prey upon children.
They always want to call us groomers, but when you look at where the abuse is coming from, it always seems to be in the churches. Now I do want to pick up the pace here because we're running behind. And here's another one I want to throw at you, Dr. Rob. So Greene County Hospital is set to end their labor and delivery services at the end of January of next year, forcing pregnant women to travel 30 to 45 minutes to deliver at hospitals outside the county. Hospital leadership says staffing shortages and long-term financial losses, driven in part by Medicaid cuts and low insurer reimbursement, made the service unsustainable. Prenatal, postpartum, and other women's health services will remain local, along with perinatal navigator program to help patients transfer care. The hospital's emergency department will remain prepared for unexpected labor cases with continued OB training for ER staff. Hospital officials warn the closure reflects broader threats to rural healthcare access in Indiana if Medicaid reimbursement and insurer accountability do not improve. Now, Doc, you handle end-of-life care a lot in your line of work, and we're talking about beginning-of-life care here, but in a way, it's all a reflection of a breakdown in our rural healthcare system. And that's precisely due to Medicaid cuts, is it not?
That's the biggest driver. And, I delivered a few hundred babies back in my day. So it's something I care about personally as well. And I've got children and I've got grandchildren who were born at home with midwives and on and on. But the situation in Greene County is particularly tragic and part of this pattern. So again, if you just look close by, the first the first nearby hospital that stopped OB care was Monroe Hospital. When they first opened, they did OB for a couple of years and then they stopped. And I think that was probably actually a good idea, because you do want to have a certain amount of business that allows you to kind of, have all the protocols and know what to do when things go wrong. So consolidating from Monroe to all the OB care at Bloomington Hospital, that itself I thought made reasonable sense. But then go a few years forward, actually around that, before Monroe Hospital opened, the two hospitals in Bedford, so we're talking about Bedford Regional and Dunn, they made a decision likewise to consolidate OB care in one of the hospitals, and they chose to do OB care at Dunn. Then Dunn was bought by Ascension, which is a national Catholic chain, and then just what was it, 2 years ago, Dunn announced we're going out of business completely. And so that means all OB care in Lawrence County is gone. And then actually even maybe around that same time, maybe a year before, in Martinsville, again, these are just, close by places. In Martinsville, they closed the hospital, they closed the OB, but they kept open a 24-hour emergency room. And in some ways, it made economic sense. But that's the thing, is all these crazy decisions make economic sense when that shouldn't be the reason. It's what do we as people need? Yes, Greene County is responding to economic pressure and closing down OB, and there's no upside, like I talked about when Monroe sent their OB, or when there's a certain amount of consolidation that's not bad in terms of healthcare. But in this case, not only we're asking pregnant women to be transported an hour away in labor, which just, makes me kind of tighten up in my abdomen. And I'm a guy. But then you think about, and what about prenatal care? So they're going to have to go an hour to get to their prenatal appointment. They're going to.
Well, they say that stuff's going to remain in house, but it's still the effect. The underlying root of this is that we're treating these things that should be public services as businesses, right. And we're worried about the bottom line, and they have to remain economically viable. And it's not just, hey, communities need hospitals. Yep. Period. We need to provide services to people in these places. The economics be damned, and we're just handling this entirely the wrong way. I want to move on to the next one. So, like what we've seen with these hospital closures and everything else, Republican leadership gives you. I've got a couple more quick hits demonstrating Republican malfeasance in Indiana. So Jennifer Ruth Green is running for Congress in Indiana's 1st district. She was working in the governor's office as a public safety secretary. She's agreed to pay a $10,000 fine and waived a public hearing to settle an ethics complaint. Investigators found she was misusing state staff and resources for political purposes and retaliated against an employee who reported her conduct. The settlement closes the case with no further penalties, leaving the findings uncontested as she again campaigns for Frank Mervan's seat. Also, this is from the Indiana Capitol Chronicle this week. Indiana lawmakers are teeing up new death penalty bills ahead of the 2026 session. That's right. Instead of worrying about our rural health care, Republicans are worried about different ways to murder people. Senator Mike Young and Representative Jim Lucas and Andrew Ireland are filing bills to expand execution methods, adding firing squad and nitrogen hypoxia to the state's menu of execution options. So, listen, in lieu of all this, seeing that this Republican-dominated state has its priorities backwards, the group Independent Indiana wants the state to end straight ticket voting. I had their founder and chair, Nathan Gotch, on the podcast a few months ago. This group is urging lawmakers to end straight ticket voting, arguing it hides independent candidates and reinforces one-party dominance. The group cites a new poll showing 62% of Indiana voters oppose straight ticket voting, with opposition spanning party lines. Organizers say straight ticket voting combined with gerrymandering makes Indiana elections uncompetitive by letting a small slice of primary voters decide most races. Derrick, great idea from Independent Indiana, I imagine. I would be in favor of that. How about you?
Get rid of straight ticket voting completely. There's no reason why it should be around. I mean, Give the people a freaking choice. And don't just let them go, we'll just pick this one because this is what we've always voted. Make people actually learn about the candidates. I mean, it shouldn't be one party control. Vote for the person, not the party. That's how I've always seen it.
Absolutely. And, well, maybe the fact that there is straight ticket voting will bite Republicans in the ass because they are so unpopular. Maybe people vote straight ticket for Democrats in the upcoming 2026 election. We will see. But listen, it's not like Democrats are without fault. An equal opportunity critic of bad politics and bad policies. And I want to look at what happened in Indianapolis this week, where ILEA, this state-mandated board put together to figure out the problems of Indianapolis public schools, voted 8-1 to recommend creating a new agency to oversee both IPS and charter schools. This proposal would shift major powers away from the democratically elected IPS board to a mayor-appointed body with authority over property taxes, buildings, transportation, accountability, and enrollment. Charter supporters praised the plan as a structural overhaul, while IPS advocates and community groups warned it weakens democratic oversight and accelerates privatization. If enacted by the GOP legislature, the recommendation would represent one of the biggest changes to Indianapolis school governance in decades. Lawmakers will decide whether to turn the recommendations into law when the General Assembly reconvenes in January. Listen, Maria, we just talked about this a minute ago. It's kind of been the theme of the show as we talk about it in terms of healthcare, but we're treating things that should be public services as businesses and introducing competition and market efficiency into things that should not be a concern. And I'm seeing the same thing here in Indianapolis, where these charter school monsters have sufficiently cornered a good portion of the Democratic Party. Mayor Joe Hogsett is behind this. Former Mayor Bart Peterson really kicked this thing off. Here, the Democrats are in the wrong. I don't know. Am I reading this the wrong way?
Yeah, if whoever supports this other body appointed by one person, the mayor, that's similar to what Indiana University in terms of the board of trustees being appointed by the governor. So I would have to just say that I am saying that similar to redistricting, the root of that is oppression and racism, because in terms of defunding, I mean, that's the problem. Public schools being defunded. There's not a lot of other problems. I mean, again, we're talking root cause, right? Defunding public schools has that ripple effect and causes other challenges. And yes, it is at its root oppressive and racist.
And what the charter school folks, they always point out the failing public schools, where they don't point out that the defunding, the kneecapping of public schools that sort of went into this performance. Again, we're not, our funding mechanisms are all wrong. As long as public school funding is tied to local property taxes, you're always going to get disparities. And so what will happen in Indianapolis is white flight took folks out to the suburbs, and they took the tax base with them, leaving the schools woefully underfunded. And then we wonder why they're not performing well. So let's take more money from them and give it to for-profit actors. Seems like the wrong way to go about things. I want to stay in Indianapolis and move from the schools to law enforcement. Now, There, the term-limited sheriff, Kerry Forrestal, has announced he will run for the open Indiana Senate District 31 seat being vacated by Republicans Senator Kyle Walker, who decided not to run for re-election amidst that redistricting mess. Yeah, he wasn't a fan of the threats he was receiving, got the hell out of Dodge. Don't blame him. Now, Forrestal is pitching himself as a pragmatic leader focused on lowering costs for utilities, healthcare, and groceries while emphasizing public safety. He brings decades of law enforcement experience, including serving as a U.S. Marshal for the Southern Indiana under President Obama. Now, his record includes both praise for diversity and violence prevention efforts, but also includes criticism over cooperation with ICE and housing immigration detainees. Now, as somebody who talks to a lot of candidates for state office here and holds them accountable for their positions, I'm going to say that I don't care what else you've done well, cooperating with Trump's ICE Gestapo thugs is disqualifying for any Democrat. Dr. Rob, what do you think?
I was hoping you were going to ask one of the other two about this.
Put you on the spot.
Just not something I've been following, but yeah, my first reaction is pretty clear. The whole problem of ICE running rampant around the country right now, and just the fact that when you describe them as ICE Gestapo, that's not over the top. That's fucking not over the top to call them ICE Gestapo. This is a terrible thing. So I agree with you. I would not want to support any politician who in any way would end up supporting this kind of police state stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, you got me to say all those things that I wasn't prepared to say. Good work.
Derrick, you're in the same business I am. You're talking to these Democratic office holders and office hopefuls. If you get a chance to interview Sheriff Forrestal, how would you grill him over his cooperation with ICE?
Flat out ask him, why the hell did he do it? Why did you turn on your citizens that you were elected to protect? Yeah. I mean, just flat out ask them. Don't beat around the bush. I'm not the type of person to pussyfoot anything, if we're allowed to say that.
The national Democrats, after this redistricting thing, after our victory pushing back against the gerrymander, announced that they were going to invest some funds in local races. I've got to worry that this is the kind of Democrat they want to get behind and not progressive grassroots Democrats. So, we're coming up on the end of the show here. I wanted to make sure we got this one in. We're going to revisit something from last week. We talked about this horrific incident where like 36 folks went through all of the naturalization process to become citizens. They took all their tests. They did everything except for go through the ceremony when they were stopped in their tracks and prevented from doing so by Immigration and Naturalization Services. We saw this happen again this week, where 12 folks were denied participation in Indianapolis following like I said, a similar incident last week where 38 prospective citizens were turned away. These denials coincide with the Trump administration's expansion of a travel ban and a broader pause on immigration educations for people from quote unquote high risk countries. At least one person turned away in Indianapolis is from Niger, a country newly added just this week to this expanded travel ban. Marion County Clerk Kate Sweeney Bell condemned the turnaways, noting the affected individuals had already completed all requirements for citizenship. These folks are highly vetted. Listen, any of us born here get to be citizens. We don't have to take the test. I think a lot of us probably should. And a lot of us take being American for granted. Folks like this chose America and probably love it a lot of more than a lot of native-born folks. I don't know, Maria. Am I crazy?
I mean, yes, but not in this regard. No, I'm just kidding. So as a naturalized citizen, naturalized downtown in Indianapolis when I was 8 years old, this hits very close to home for me. I mean, when I was 8, I got certain passes, I'm sure, because I was a child. And again, how many times are we going to be told that it's not the immigration, the deportations, the disappearing and kidnapping and disappearing of people is not to criminal, confined to criminals, people who have been involved in our legal system. This is so reminiscent of, of course, in 2016, of course, after 9/11, right? Just really vilifying and just ramping up the rhetoric of, we talked earlier, hopefully some people, I don't know if it's half, Derrick, but like some people should, understand the difference between being Jewish and Israel, right? But the fact of the matter is that a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people, so these people who have come here, a lot of them seeking asylum, seeking safety, are then have done all the work and then are turned away at the 11th hour or 9th, whatever the saying is, when they're about to become citizens of this country that they've worked so hard for, that they'll to get naturalized, become citizens, but also in terms of labor, they'll continue to work, because everybody has to work to live, unfortunately. So just inhumane, period.
Yeah, and the people who are really destroying this country are not immigrants. They are not, whether legal or illegal. It's the folks in the White House. It's the folks profiled in that Vanity Fair article from earlier. It's Trump. It's Vance. It's Caroline Leavitt. It's Stephen Miller. My God, that guy is a ghoul. He should be deported. So I want to end on I guess, an inconsequential light story this week. So the Chicago Bears are eyeballing a new stadium, and they've announced this week they're exploring Northwest Indiana as a potential location for a domed stadium, immediately igniting a cross-state political fight. Now, Governor Mike Braun welcomed the idea, while Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker blasted it as a slap in the face, with Illinois lawmakers pushing back on proposed tax breaks. Critics say the team may be using Indiana as leverage to secure favorable tax terms in Illinois, raising questions about the team's strategy and political read of the moment. And I'm going to take this one myself because I'm from Northwest Indiana and I am a Chicago Bears fan, and the team should play in the city under open air. None of this dome bull crap. That's for the Vikings. That's for the Lions. Real football is played in real weather on the frozen tundra. And that is where we are going to end this week, but not before I give each of you an opportunity to shamelessly promote yourselves. Let's begin with Derrick. Derrick, where can the good folks find you?
YouTube at Hold 'em Accountable. Just search it up. Also, Facebook, Instagram, Hold 'em Accountable everywhere. And keep watching for big news.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Maria, shamelessly promote yourself. Where can folks find you, and where can they learn more about Hoosier Asian American Power?
They can learn about Hoosier Asian American Power at HoosierAAP.org. Most of our handles on the socials is Hoosier AAP. And I really have to redeem myself for my first question. American President, Stand By Me, When Harry Met Sally, and A Few Good Men. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Dr. Rob, close us out.
Okay, so my goal is that everybody in this country has affordable health care, and that's my dream and my work. And so my organization nationally is called Physicians for National Health Program. Just remember pnhp.org. And in Indiana, our state chapter is called Medicare for All Indiana. And I'm on Substack, Medicare for All Indiana.
All right. Very good. Well, happy holidays to all of you. Thank each of you for joining us. Thanks all the folks in the chat, even you trolls. You kept me busy today. Yes, but happy holidays to you and yours. And I will be here again next week. But until that time, love each other, Indiana.